Uncovering the stories that matter inside Out West on BBC One with Alistair McKee.
Hello from Bristol Children's Hospital, where we're investigating concerns about heart surgery here. Tonight we speak to the parents of 2 children who died at the hospital.
So now we've got a child within 21 months who's gone from a good heart function to poor heart function. It's not like he had bad care within that time, he had no care at all.
Also tonight, what happened to all the flax? I meet a man trying to bring it back.
What you do, grasp a handful, then we lay it out, root end one way, seeds the other way.
I'm Alistair McKee, and this is Inside Out West.
We all want our local NHS to be a service we can trust, especially when it's our children at stake. And the care of children's hearts in Bristol has had a traumatic history. 2 decades ago, at least 35 babies died unnecessarily following substandard surgery. The scandal led to multiple inquiries, and with a new surgeon, the unit rebooted itself to become one of the best in the country. But now, new concerns are emerging.
A coroner has ruled that Bristol Children's Hospital lost opportunities in treating a 4-year-old boy who died following heart surgery.
The last 3 months have seen national headlines accompanying the inquests into the deaths of 2 children at the Bristol Children's Hospital in 2012. A report by the hospital linked the deaths, as well as several near misses, to poor staffing. The coroner found there was no gross negligence, but in the case of 4-year-old Sean Turner, said there were lost opportunities. All very concerning, according to Steve Bolsin, the Bristol doctor who blew the whistle to me 19 years ago and who was forced to leave and work in Australia.
There were warning signs, there were people raising flags, as there were 20 years previously, as you know, and still children are being allowed to die.
Following these 2 deaths, a report by the health watchdog, the Care Quality Commission, demanded more money to be spent on staff and resources. And the hospital said that's exactly what they did, investing more than £1 million to employ more nurses. But new questions are now being asked about the care here in Bristol and the wider services for children's heart surgery here in the West.
That's the one with
Paul Starr and Catherine Holly live in Great Elm, near Frome. In June 2009, they had a little boy called Samuel.
He's a beautiful boy. He was smart, clever, he had good vocabulary, he had lots of friends, he went to nursery. He had a nice life. He had plenty of time with his family and friends.
He was full of fun.
He's well loved.
Samuel was born with a heart condition, and after initial surgery at 9 months, he thrived. But at age 3, his parents were told that Samuel's condition had deteriorated.
We sat down at the cardiologist's desk and he said he didn't want to shock us, but Samuel needed surgery that summer, and we were shocked. It wasn't at all in our understanding that this was going to have to happen.
and it was, later we found it was quite severe, really.
Samuel's operation in August 2012 took longer than expected, and there were complications that required additional surgery.
As we were coming back to the ward, the matron was there, and he wanted to confirm that we were Samuel's parents, and we said yes. And he said at that point they think Samuel's had a stroke. So that was obviously devastating news for us.
After weeks in the paediatric intensive care unit, known as PICU, Samuel had a cardiac arrest.
We came back to the hospital as quick as we possibly could to be told that a second cardiac arrest looked imminent, and would we consider withdrawing treatment? And we had to agree. at that point didn't look recoverable. So we went back into PICU. They removed his lines. And we spoke to Samuel, read him stories, and he passed away in our arms.
Heart surgery on children is complex and carries risks. And as a result of the Bristol heart scandal, deaths amongst children who've had surgery are monitored and compared to other hospitals. League tables are now published. But care at Bristol has slipped, and although its results are classified as safe, its ranking measured over the last 3 years has dropped from 3rd to 7th out of 10.
As far as I can see, it's not definitive data that proves that Bristol was statistically significantly worse, but what it is data that is indicative of a need to change your approach to these particular types of operations.
What's crucial to a hospital's league table position is how many children die within 30 days of their operation. Now, following Samuel Starr's death, a medical professional raised concerns that the hospital might have been keeping him alive for longer than was necessary in order to pass that 30-day point.
Nurses' notes submitted for a review into Samuel Starr's death said,
"I was concerned that stalling for a couple of days would not only be cruel to the family and unethical, but would possibly mean that survival from cardiac surgery for 30 days would be achieved for statistics."
Not surprisingly, the Starrs were shocked by this suggestion.
We had some information from a nurse involved in Samuel's care that she had questioned whether Samuel's passing had been manipulated for the sake of statistical records.
Yeah.
That really stopped us in our tracks.
And do you think, in hindsight, would you wish that they'd allowed him to die earlier?
If
I think we should have been given the option to. We should have known. They knew.
We put this allegation to the medical director of the Bristol Children's Hospital.
Our clinicians utterly refute that allegation. It is very difficult to believe that an allegation can be meant to be quite that blunt. I don't believe there is any evidence to support that allegation. And the attempting to prolong survival so that a certain statistic is achieved is utterly unbelievable, and I cannot believe it would even cross the clinician's mind that that would be a factor in making any clinical decisions at all. Clinical decisions are made consistently in the best interests of the patient, irrespective of what data might be collected.
Despite the many questions the Starrs have about Samuel's operation and subsequent care, their biggest concern is whether Samuel's death might have been prevented if there weren't huge delays to his regular checkups while he was alive. Samuel's local hospital was the RUH in Bath, where Bristol consultants held outpatient clinics.
Sam's condition meant that he was supposed to have regular scans to make sure his condition didn't suddenly worsen. Now, following successful surgery in 2010, his heart was scanned, but that turned out to be the last scan he had for some 20 months.
So now we've got a child within 21 months has gone from a good heart function to poor heart function. You know, that's happened within that time because it's not like he had bad care within that time. He had no care at all.
So how can a child with a serious heart condition essentially drop off the system? There was some human error. The Starrs asked a community nurse to ring for an appointment on their behalf. She rang 5 times over as many months, but failed to get an appointment. And Inside Out has discovered that another key factor in these delays was a new American IT system that was being installed to deal with appointments at the RUH.
I remember a point at which loads of senior responsible owners were created.
Richard Bacon MP, who's been asking questions about NHS IT systems for years, says that its faults were well known.
There were problems with bookings being missed because the data would just drop off the system. When you've got things like waiting lists, which we have had in the NHS, which are largely unknown in the United States, making a system deal with waiting lists when it's not designed to deal with waiting lists causes its own big set of problems.
And minutes of board meetings at the RUH a year before Samuel's death show the hospital was fully aware of the problems with their new computer system.
There were significant issues with the data that had not been migrated. This affected long-term follow-up appointments.
What do you feel now that you know that this was a recognised problem a year before?
I'm absolutely disgusted that it was recognised, but no or limited action was taken on it.
What should they have done?
Reverted back to the old system whilst they got the new system properly up and running, so that there was these problems didn't occur. How can you rely on a new system if it doesn't work?
In a review of Samuel's death, Bristol Children's Hospital concluded that these delays might have played a part. But were other patients affected by these delays too?
We asked the RUH in Bath how many appointments were overdue or delayed because of the new computer system. Now, they told us there were 63 overdue appointments, with some delays of up to 2 years before they were discovered.
It's very, very serious. The nature of this is that you're dealing with people's lives, and it's absolutely essential that you have, if you're going to be using computer systems, that you have computer systems that work.
The RUH declined to answer any specific questions about their computer system, saying in a statement,
The coroner's inquest will be held very soon, and we hope that this will provide both Samuel's family and everyone involved in his care with a clearer indication of the circumstances surrounding his death.
Is whether any of the other delays involving children with cardiac problems at the RUH might also have affected their care. Despite not knowing all the circumstances behind their son's death, the Stars have at least some of their questions answered, but other families have been less fortunate. In April 2012, Daniel and Debbie Janu from Gloucester were the proud parents of a baby girl called Isabella, but she was also born with a heart defect that needed corrective surgery to give her a better life.
We took her down to theatre. Isabella sat on Debbie's lap. The gas was applied and she fell asleep. And we waited, and we were expecting to be told soon that we were to have her back and take her home in a few hours maybe. Shortly after thinking that, nurses ran into the room and told us that they'd started the procedure. It hadn't been completed fully, because during some parts of the procedure, Isabella's heart had went into arrest.
Later that day, Isabella sadly died. But what caused her to suddenly crash during surgery? The reality is that the Janus simply don't know, because they say the Bristol Children's Hospital didn't talk to them for 5 months or offer to let them see an investigation into their daughter's death.
I was asked whether we could comment on our child death review when it was in draft stage, just to verify any of the facts as we understood them. I was told that this wasn't possible. I was asked whether we could have a copy of the child death review for our own daughter, and I was told that we wouldn't be allowed to get this.
Last November, following the scandal of hundreds of unnecessary deaths at Mid Staffordshire Hospital, the Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt said that the public will see a new culture of openness in the NHS.
From 2014, every organisation registered with the CQC will have a statutory duty of candour. Patients must be told promptly about any avoidable harm, but there'll be a statutory requirement to notify any harm that has led to avoidable death or serious injury.
But what do the Janus think of this promise? We showed them the speech.
Not to be open and transparent with patients or families at the earliest reasonable opportunity should risk having their indemnity from litigation awards reduced
What do you think of that?
So our experiences in the 4 months after Isabella died doesn't really follow an openness policy by the hospital.
We've sent many emails to the hospital and we've had
no reply.
No reply.
And it seems as if following the 4 months following Isabella's death, we've had nothing but obstacles and hurdles that the trust have put in our way to obtaining the truth.
Well, I think it's part of this culture of openness and honesty that has failed to pervade the National Health Service. We have people at the top telling us very clearly that the National Health Service has changed, that the culture is now one of transparency and openness. This is not what we're seeing in Bristol. Perhaps the message hasn't got to Bristol. Perhaps somebody needs to come down and explain to them what openness and transparency are.
We also showed Jeremy Hunt's speech to Bristol's medical director.
From 2014, every organisation registered with the CQC will have a statutory duty of candour.
Is that something you think you've been doing?
Yes. I mean, we want to be even better at it. We know now we've made changes to some of our policies and procedures to make sure that it is inbuilt into what we do.
The parents like the Janus say that the Trust has only just, in the last few weeks, started to have a fuller dialogue with them about what happened there, when this is several months after their bereavement.
Well, I know that we did make contact with those parents immediately after their bereavement. We made several contacts.
But they say they were told that you were not prepared to let them see the child death review, that they could only see a summary of it.
I don't know about that. I'm not aware of that.
Can you understand why families like the Janus feel that when they're being told, or you can't see the full child death review, they automatically feeling that there's some sort of cover-up going on?
If that's what they were told, then I can understand how they would feel that. As I said, one thing we want to learn from the review is how we improve the ways in which we communicate with patients so they understand what's going on. We know we get a lot of feedback from parents, and we know that 98% of parents measured over an entire year have said to us that their care was either excellent, very good, or good.
Can you sort of sum up in your thoughts where we are now as a unit in terms of safety and care for patients?
I think primarily, fundamentally, it's important to recognise that Bristol is a safe unit.
Since I started investigating this story, parents, including the Stars and the Janus, met the NHS medical director, Sir Bruce Keogh, to talk about their concerns. Immediately after the meeting, he announced an independent review.
We've heard some very harrowing stories in a very dignified way. What I'm really after is getting to the bottom of these problems, finding a solution and getting the Bristol unit to be one of the best units in the country as quickly as possible.
Next week, the inquest into the death of Samuel Starr begins. I'll try and get to the bottom of what happened. It will again bring care here in Bristol and at the RUH into the spotlight.
The government is now deciding which heart surgery units in England should close. And with Bristol in the firing line, many patients here in the West are still waiting to be convinced that this region's service is as good as it can be, and hospitals are being open about problems they face.
In our final film tonight, we're looking back at a once vital but now largely forgotten arable crop. Flax went into decline 400 years ago, but during World War I, it became essential for the production of aircraft wings. I've been to meet a farmer in Gloucestershire who's trying to bring it back again. This is not your everyday boat. And apart from the wooden frame that gives it its shape, this boat is made entirely out of this, flax. In a moment, I'll be taking to the water to find out if it can really float. But first, a bit more about the strange crop it's made from. On a farm not far from Tetbury lives Simon Cooper, with what's probably the last field of flax in the country. Simon, hello.
Oh, hello. Good to see you.
So this is your field of flax?
Yes, this is the extent of our crop, 1/2 an acre.
Right. What made you decide to start growing flax?
Well, curiosity really. It's been a crop which has grown for thousands of years and not for the last 50 years since the introduction of man-made fibres. So we thought we'd find out why or why not.
Simon is particularly keen to find new uses for flax fibres, but he's learning by farming it the traditional way, and that means pulling by hand.
What you do, grasp a handful, pull it, give it a quick shake to get rid of any of the soil, fill your other hand up, then when you've got a handful, lay it out, root end one way, seeds the other way.
Once pulled, the crop is laid out in the field to allow moisture from the ground to dissolve the tough outer stalks so that we can get to the all-important fibres within. You've got to get it just rotten enough, but not too rotten, otherwise it spoils. Fields of flax are a very rare sight in Britain today, but for many years it was an important crop. The ancient Egyptians farmed it to make their famous linen. In fact, there's evidence that it was grown in the country of Georgia as early as 30,000 BC. Here in Britain, it was a popular crop for clothes and other products until relatively recently. To learn about its decline, I'm being joined by an agricultural historian. So, John, for thousands of years, flax would have been a really common sight in this country. Why did it disappear?
Well, the main reason was really the availability of cheap cotton. With the expansion of cotton production in the southern states in America, it really undermined it as a viable source of fibre.
So it was cheaper to bring cotton in from America than it was to grow flax in this country?
Considerably cheaper. The American system, based on the extensive use of slaves, enabled it to be transported to Britain in increasing quantities and at ever lower prices.
Despite a long-term decline, the outbreak of World War I saw demand for flax growing again, chiefly to make the wings of aircraft. And with their men away on the front line, the country turned to its land girls to do the hard work, as one later explained.
We were taken to and from the fields in lorries, a jolly ride bumping over the country roads, standing up and holding on. Flax must be pulled by hand and not by machines, we were told. We were a welcome amusement for the folk who lived around and in Yeovil. They came in hundreds to see girls in breeches, living in tents. Girls were helping to make those aeroplanes that zoomed low over the fields of Somerset.
Back on the farm, I'm finding out what's happening next to the flax we've harvested with Simon's wife, Anne.
Alistair, this has now been dried out for several months, been stored away until we're ready to use it. And first process we'll do is breaking.
Right.
So
let's break.
Let's crack on.
First, we break the stalks using a hand roller built by Anne and Simon based on designs from the late 1700s. Next comes something called scutching.
So this is the scutching, and as you can see, it flies everywhere. And you get lots of small pieces of fibre coming off.
Once upon a time, every worker in the village would have had their own personalised scutching knife.
People spent a lot of time on their scutching knives. They would decorate and paint, and they'd give them to their loved ones.
You knew you were loved if you got a scutching knife for Christmas.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is your own design.
Obviously, I'm not loved.
To scrape away the last dusty shives of stalk, the fibres are pulled through a set of hackling combs, ready for spinning into yarn.
So you're going on to the next ones.
Is that ready?
I think so. That's looking good.
So onto here.
So all the time you're getting rid of the rest of the shives, you're separating out those fibres.
I started with rather more. I'm not sure I've been very efficient here.
But it's very lovely. It's very fine.
I think you're just being nice, Anne.
I think I might be.
The fibres vary in length, and numbers of them may be stuck together. So they are drawn by hand over a series of metal spikes.
With World War II looming, the country again found itself in need of flax. By now, the crop was being imported, but the prospect of war cut off the supply.
In 1938, flax imports from Russia virtually ceased, so consequently it was necessary for the government to make strenuous efforts to try and increase production. Farmers were encouraged to plant it. There's a significant increase in the acreage, and this is accompanied by the fact that labour is released to enable activities such as weeding the crop in the spring and harvesting the crop in the autumn to be successfully undertaken.
First, a boy takes pieces from the bundle and places them in the machine. They are now passing into the part of the machine where the combing or hackling is done. Very careful looking will enable you to see the steady rise and fall of the flyers as they wind the yarn onto the bobbins.
Back with Anne, and we're spinning our flax fibres into yarn the old-fashioned way. And then, finally, our yarn is woven into cloth. So that's it. I've been through every step to get from this to this. And it's only taken, well, all day. Despite being part of life in Britain for thousands of years, the farming, processing and weaving of flax has all but vanished today. So is there any chance of a revival? Is there a future for flax in this country?
I think the future could be quite bright, particularly given the fact it's a very strong fibre, and there is considerable potential for further expansion, particularly if we can successfully mechanise the labour-intensive task of harvesting it.
Simon also thinks flax has a future as an alternative to man-made fibres.
The new uses are in composites. It can replace or complement glass fibre. It's got natural variability in it, and it adds flexibility to composite materials. So there's a great deal of research in this country as well looking into the uses of plant fibres.
To prove his point, Simon has developed a canoe made with woven flax fabric, waterproofed with flax resin. So you reckon it floats?
Yes.
Well, the only way to find out is to put it in the water. I'm going to look pretty stupid if it doesn't. From linen bed sheets to aircraft wings and Canadian canoes, there's no doubt flax has its uses. And who knows, the idea of a locally grown boat might catch on.
Are you canoeing in slow motion?
And BBC Local Radio will be unearthing many of the forgotten stories of World War I and its impact here at home. You can catch those at 8:15 every morning this week. Well, that's just about all we've got time for tonight. But if you'd like to keep in touch with us, then why not find us on Twitter? Or you can email us. The address is insideoutwest@bbc.co.uk. But from all of us here in Bristol, thanks for watching. Good night. Next week, we're in Romania on the trail of the fake bomb detectors.
You are crazy people. You are really crazy people. What is this BBC? What is so big deal about this BBC?